Morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And thanks, David, for joining us. I was just asking David what kind of audiences he's used to, and he was saying that the first time he was in Bangalore, he was addressing an audience of about 5,000 people. And there were another 6 million people listening to the podcast or the YouTube video. This is certainly not one of those. I was also asking him what is his typical class size when he teaches at the university, and he was saying he teaches graduate students mostly, and the class size is 25. So this is definitely larger than the class size, but much lower than the audience that he is normally used to. So just to make this efficient for all of us, we will try to keep this like a cozy podcast kind of thing. And also make sure that it's a lot more interactive. So I have a bunch of questions for David. Most of you must know about what David does, but we will get to hear from him as well. But associate professor at Bangalore University, a futurist.
Full professor.
Professor at Bangalore University, futurist and author of 3 books. And he was saying that he mentors about 70 PhD students. So we'll get into the session, but I was also curious in asking myself early this morning, as among all the sessions, why did Claude choose me to run this session? And in some sense, while David is a futurist, as a seed investor and somebody who's heavily invested in technology and entrepreneurship, I think we are also in the business of predicting the future. The only difference being that, we get it wrong most of the time. People like David get it right most of the time. So I'm hoping to learn from, what are the ways in which we can get better at this, and hopefully for the audience, same kind of feedback. Just to make sure that we all have context to what David has done, while it is difficult to do justice to his entire body of work over these many decades. I'll just request David to give a quick introduction of what he's working on, and what is his body of work, and what kind of work that he's currently focused on. And after that introduction, we'll jump into a set of questions, which I've had a chance to briefly discuss with him. And more importantly, at the end, we will open it out for audience questions. Yeah, David, would you?
Well, people think that I have a gazing ball with which I'm trying to find out what's going to happen. Let me just, briefly say the basic assumption of futures thinking, and that will give us some sense how come we are able to foresee things a little bit more reliably than many other people, many other experts. Generally speaking, future studies is a branch of another academic discipline, which is systems thinking. We are systems thinkers. We are trying to understand how systems are evolving. And the basic assumption is that there is logic how systems are evolving. And by saying systems, I mean all kinds of systems, from biological systems, geopolitical systems, economic systems, and even technological systems. Most of the people think that it's impossible to predict technologies because, you can never foresee an idea that will pop up in the mind of a PhD candidate 20 years from now. That's how people think things are evolving, even with our tools, the tools we are developing. But we are coming from a different assumption that says that even the tools that we are developing have some sense, have some logic, and we are, as a species, developing, evolving in some kind of patterns, if you wish. And we are trying to understand that logic. It's not an easy thing to understand the logic of systems. We are still a very primitive species. We really don't understand very complicated and sophisticated systems. And we'll have still a long journey to go to understand how systems are evolving. But nonetheless, when we are stumbling upon an idea that describes how systems are evolving, with that idea, we are trying, of course, to put it on some charts, on some models, mathematical, statistical models, in order to foresee the next stage of that system. This is what we call, generally speaking, futures thinking. And that's what makes us different from many other experts. Many other experts, most of the time what they're doing is what we call linear extrapolation. They look at the past, they see a trend, and they're extrapolating in a linear way most of the time. Okay? We know that there is no system that is evolving in a linear way. The more systems are very complex and sophisticated, the more there are a lot of curves that are happening in their evolution. And we are trying actually to see those curves and give some reliability to what we see. This is the most important thing in science. You know, whatever we do is based upon some kind of measurement that gives reliability to our understanding. And we bring that measure to the decision-making process in order for the decision makers to evaluate those trends based upon the reliability that we also bring to the table. So this is what makes us different. Now, there are experts that have the guts to see things in a very unusual manner, but they cannot replicate it, and they cannot even explain it. And from time to time, we see great leaders, great business people that have insights that they cannot even explain, and they turn to be right. But we cannot rely on these people because you never know who are they. So we are trying to bring that kind of thinking into a very systematic way. And with that systematic way, we are able, up to now at least, you know, generally speaking, this discipline has evolved, started evolving just about after World War II. And from then, we had a lot of studies, doing a lot of studies in different disciplines, different subject matters. Generally speaking, we are now estimating that about 70% of the predictions that were made were at the end correct. Now, I hope you understand that 70% is really something unusual for a species that didn't have those tools that can give him, you know, some assurance that whatever he thinks about the future will actually happen at the end. We still have, you know, a long journey to, you know, fine-tune our tools, our models, in order to bring those models to be much more accurate. But 70%, I hope you understand, this is something really unusual. How was my introduction to the field?
Oh, very good. There's this famous Yogi Berra quote which says that it is tough to make predictions, especially about the future, right? So hopefully with the tools...
Those are cynical people.
So with those tools and the methodology that you're saying, and the 70% success rate of being able to predict, I'm sure there is some science which during the course of this conversation you will be able to share a little bit of it with the audience so that we can also get a little better at this. Starting with the macro question, David, right? You know, it's very easy to look at change that is happening in front of us and be carried away, either on the side of hope or optimism, or on the side of anxiety, saying that it's going to be really bad or this is going to be really life-changing, right? And if we just step back a little bit and look at the last 5,000, 7,000 years of human beings and how they've evolved, it is quite possible that every 200, 250 years, something like this has happened, right? Either as an accident, either as a natural disaster, or some change, or there are many technological advances, not all of it is digital software, right? Agriculture, the way we have organized labor, you know, finding out how microbes work, right? Several things. sitting where we are today, right, and looking at the next 45, 50 years, and looking at everything that we are reading about the headlines in terms of what AI will do, and these waves have come and gone. The one thing that I always ask myself is, how real is this change, right? Is something different this time, right? So just in terms of the impact of this technology, are we overreacting or are we underreacting, or this time it's going to be more closer to what people put it out to be, just in terms of the broader impact on society. So help us calibrate, right? How do you see the response that we need to have today to the sense of to the slew of technology change that we are seeing around us?
That's a topic I'm about to publish in a book in a month.
Okay.
So I'll try to
everyone
summarize the
everyone
book.
in the audience is going to get a special preview to that.
I'll try to summarize the book in a few sentences as much as I can. Let's take, for example, AI. Most of the people think that AI is something so unusual that it's going to shake the foundations of everything. I'm not part of these people.
Okay, and two of us. Yeah.
Okay. You too? Great. Now I'll try to explain it. In order to explain it, let me give a very broad perspective to the present. Okay, we as a species, we do not accept somehow, I don't know why, we do not accept our physical and cognitive features as a given. Okay? We are for millennia already trying to push the envelope. Okay, let's, a little bit, elaborate. Think about millennia ago. By the way, we are the Homo sapiens. As far as we know, Homo sapiens was born in Africa somewhere about 250, 300,000 years ago. We are, up to now, there were 6 variants of the Homo sapiens. We are the 6th one. All the other 5 variants has disappeared. Okay, so we are a variant that probably exists between 12,000 years to, at best, 30,000 years. Okay? Somehow, our variant has succeeded to survive up to now. One of the characteristics that helped us survive is that we really do not accept our constraints, physical and cognitive constraints, as given. And just think about, at the beginning, we said to ourselves, we don't like, moving in space in 4 kilometer speed. That's not we would like much faster to move in space. So we were able to develop a piece of rock in a circular way in order a little bit to move faster. But that was not enough. And then just, take it in time, and you'll see we said, it's not enough, our strength. We want something that will help us enhance our physical strength. And there was a time just a century ago that we said, that's not enough, we want to fly. And we developed, tools with which we were able to do amazing, flights. Now we are, by the way, I don't know if you are familiar with one of the great achievements at the moment, is that we are about to go outside the solar system, okay, which is just mind-boggling a century ago, right? So at the 20th century, we said, well, okay, we have pushed the envelope of our physical entity. Now let's push the cognitive abilities. At the beginning, we said, well, our memory is nothing. Let's develop a tool with which we can, collect a lot of memories and be able to access it in real time from everywhere. And then we said, that's not enough. Let's analyze that memory. Okay? We are now at a point in which we have so much data that is accumulated every fragment of a second. And we are trying to make sense of that data, and we are trying to mimic the way our mind is thinking. We call it intelligence, which is actually just a very primitive algorithm that just predicts, based on huge amounts of, gigantic amounts of databases, the logic, how sentences are built. And when you ask something, that algorithm is trying to organize those sentences to make sense of those. This is what we call now AI, okay? And we are very far from what we will be able to develop with that, that way to mimic our intelligence. I hope you understand. Even our tools now, when you ask something, they can give you a very large, a very sophisticated answer that doesn't have any sense. We call it hallucination in AI. And this is exactly what experts are saying. Even they don't have anything to say, they can say it in a very, very nice way, and people think it's smart, okay? But this is not really, those features are not the basic, the most important characteristic of our species. There are other animals that are much stronger than us, much even intelligent than us. What really makes us so special in evolution is that we have consciousness. The fact that I know is something unusual as far as I know, as we know. There are no other animals that are able to do such a thing. Now, what we have been doing in the last 300 years is developing tools with which we say, when we know, are we sure that if we know something, it's real, which is called reliability in science. But we are just at the very initial stage of really understanding what is it exactly that sentence which I just said, that when I know something, I know that I know something, which is what we call at the moment consciousness. We don't even know how to define consciousness. So we are just at a stage in which we are going to give our tools to do a lot of work for us, physical and cognitive work, and then we'll start paying attention to one of the most important features of our species, which is consciousness. And we will start defining it. We will start to studying where is it exactly. Can we share it? Can we develop it? Can we mimic it in our tools? So whoever says AI is going to bring havoc to humanity, I will just remind him that from the beginning, every tool we have developed, there were people that were pessimistic about humanity. Think about the first wheel that we have developed. How many people died because that piece of rock? And people said, "Oh my God, this is going to be a catastrophe." And when we have developed, of course, wings, and then when we have developed nuclear power, and this is the nature of our species. We are a very frightened species, which is very good, by the way, very, very good even. Okay, so we are going through now another phase of enhancing our cognitive abilities. But this is not the real thing that is going to happen. Nobody is speaking about, can we mimic, can we insert our consciousness into our tools? Can we enhance consciousness to ourselves? This is the big thing. And this is just 30, 40, 50 years from now. So 50 years from now, when people will speak about the 20s, they say, they were so primitive. They thought AI is something big. It's not.
No, that's a sobering thought for the morning. Just jumping from...
I'm very optimistic. Do you see that? Great.
Jumping from the book that you're about to publish, of which a sneak preview you gave us, going back to the book that you already published, you have this interesting concept of future memory, right, which you define as the collective ability of humanity to predict and shape the future. I was just reflecting on it. It reminded me of this Eastern concept of karma, right? Which is essentially future is the consequence of your past actions. So, just for the benefit of our audience, can you help us reduce this abstract future memory concept with a couple of practical examples on what does it actually mean?
Let's again take a very larger scope of what's happening. We are probably, even though there are already some studies that point that not only humans can think about the future, also some animals can think about the future, okay? But they can think about the future in a very short term. Let's say most of the animals can think maybe at the beginning something like a few minutes ahead. Some other animals, they can go 1 year ahead or something like that. We are the only species that can think about the future and change our behavior at the present, even though that future did not happen yet. There are a lot of animals that can react better to triggers that are coming into their surrounding, much better than us. But we are the only species that can think about, let's say, a rock that might, go down from a mountain, and even though nothing has happened, and once only in 50 years there is a rock that is, collapsing from somewhere, we will change our behavior at the present and go far from that mountain whatsoever. We are the only species that has that ability to what we call future simulations of different memories. Those memories are not coming from the past, they are coming from the future. So this is the first time that we are measuring that ability neurologically. It seems to be that as a species, we are really evolving, and we have found the exact spot in our brain in which we are able to do that kind of thinking. And there are a lot of studies that are trying, to harm that spot and see if something happens, which is mind-boggling. There is a study that we did in Israel in which we have inserted a needle to that spot in the brain, and we asked people, what do you have tomorrow to do? And people said, what's tomorrow? What is it? And then we took off that needle and asked, what do you have to do a month from now? And then they say, a month from now I have to travel there. And there were actually some people that said, please insert back that needle. All right, so we are just at the beginning to understand, of course, our mind. We are at the century of mind technologies and mind understanding. So it looks like we are evolving even neurologically. And we are able, as a species, altogether, we are able to do, first of all, we are able to awaken to see how our action today, our actions are going to have great impact a century and a couple centuries ahead. There is even, by the way, a group of futurists that are studying 10,000 years in the future, which is, 10,000 years? Come on, let's try to study only 10 years. But we as a species, we are evolving and we are awakening to understand that things are evolving and we need to take care of those things that are evolving, not in a yearly manner or a 5-year manner or a 10-year manner, not even a 50-year manner. We are speaking about a century ahead. By the way, there are a lot of studies that are trying to understand what kind of wars are going to be a century from now. What kind of society is going, what kind of civilization, what kind of technologies, everything you get, what kind of religions. Now, we are awakening to understand how things are evolving in a very far, we call it future span. Our future span is enlarging. And this is something that we are just about to experience, we as species. There are some of us that are doing it already for millennia, but not as a species. Now, as a species, we are able to do it collectively. And this is what we're doing here. This is a way, one way to think about the future. But, most of us are thinking just, a few years ahead. We are now, as a species, evolving to be able, neurologically, to think a century ahead, which will make our species very different than it used to be up to now. And some of us, of course, will not survive evolution because they won't be able to do it. But our kids will be able to do it much better. We already measure it, by the way. I have a lot of studies in which we measure the ability of our kids to think futures better than their parents. And just generally speaking, if you are not aware of it, just in the last 50 years, IQ worldwide has augmented by 17%, which is mind-boggling in a matter of 50 years. So we are going through a very, very accelerated evolutionary process. And part of it is understanding the past better, that's past memory, and developing future memory and bringing those two kinds of memories into the present in order to change our behavior.
Yeah, thanks, David. You talk about people being able to predict 10 years ahead, 50 years ahead, 10,000 years ahead, right? So for all of us here, irrespective of the time span that we are going to predict, right? What is a good starting point, right? How should we think a little different to get better at this?
That's a very hard question. I think the best way, there are different people that will answer this question differently. Okay, if I can add something, probably I have the same ideas, but I would like to add something. Whether we are aware of it or not, we are surrounded by similar minds. Everybody that's here, we are kind of similar people. We had somehow the same education, same socio-economic status, same universities. We read similar books, and etc. Our mind is somehow, we can say it generally speaking again, that we are similar. And this is why we came here all together, because we are similar. We said this is important to be here. If you are to understand a little bit better the future and prepare yourself, surround yourself by people that are not similar to you, that are very different the way that you are thinking. It's not an easy way to do, because it's not an easy thing, to handle people that are thinking really very different than you. But surround yourself with at least 30% at least of people that are constantly thinking differently from you. That will challenge your paradigms and your assumptions. And if you are open enough and listen to those perspectives, you will have advantage much more than other experts or whatever. It's not easy, right? It's really not easy. We tend to, to collect similar people around us without even, paying attention to it.
Get out of your echo chambers. So on the point of this being able to predict the future, there's also this notion that future is always different. It's always about change. I was reading this fascinating book by Morgan Housel. It's called Same as Ever, where he talks about this whole idea of, well, everybody is trying to predict the future and what will change and all that. There is some merit in asking ourselves what has not changed over long periods of time, right? So when we think about the future, when we think about how tomorrow will be different from today, what do you think is the time that we should spend, or what is the merit in this point of also thinking hard enough about what's not going to change, what's going to be enduring? Is that a point worth keeping in mind at all, or the focus needs to be only on what's going to be the delta?
Well, we cannot think always about unusual things that might happen. It's impossible, to sustain and survive mentally in that mindset. Even though there are people that are constantly thinking about what might be different. But these are people that you need only one or two around you. you need the others that have that ability to continue the trend. Not, shake the foundations of your system constantly. This is impossible to sustain. Nonetheless, we have to be aware. And again, this is not an easy cognitive ability. That we are in a time that change is so accelerating. We don't have enough time to adjust and even to be aware of what's happening. I'll give you just one example. At this very moment, there are so many things that are happening in human history that we are not aware of, really, that are going to totally change our civilization. From new technologies that are developing to geopolitical issues. Most of the time, we need perspective, not only to understand, but first of all, to know what's happening, and then to understand. But at this very moment, there are so many things that are happening that we're not aware of. Nonetheless, to understand what's happening. Therefore, we need always to leave about 10 to 20% of our efforts and resources to be able to invest in cases in which we are totally surprised. And I don't have to explain even what happened to Israel lately. That's exactly the point. That's exactly what happens during history all over the world for millennia. We are time after time surprised about things that are happening. So we need to leave always those 10 to 20%. It depends on the time, it depends where you are on this planet. I believe that there are places that they need to leave 30% of their resources to those kind of surprises that shake the foundations of a system. And we need to know that we are at a time in history that things are happening so fast, we don't have enough time to adjust. And if you don't, put aside those resources, you might even disappear in evolution. And it happened all over, history in different places worldwide. Resilience means that not only you are able to change, you are able to put resources in something you don't have time to change. This is very, very important from my point of view. Okay? And we have always to be aware of that there will be great surprises. There is no way to foresee those surprises. In future studies, there is a whole category of methodologies and of course studies that are trying to foresee what we call the wild cards of futures. Wild cards means that at the present, their probability that they will happen is about 20% to 30%. And the wild cards are emerging time after time in a very short period. It used to be that those wild cards would happen once in a century, once in millennia even. Now those wild cards are happening about 2 to 3 years constantly. And those wild cards are really very significant. So we have always to put in mind to leave those 20 to 30% resources for those wild cards that we will not have time to adjust to. And our resources will take care of it. That doesn't sound so optimistic, but this is life.
David, you spoke about the development of these tools and methodologies that you use in your lab that allows you to get to about 70% prediction accuracy, right? And there is this tendency to also look at the big arc of history, right? One big thing happened and then lots of things changed. But we actually meticulously look at or trace the change, right? There is a lot of series of small events that have led up to this large change, right, which we call path dependence. So how do you reconcile the need for this prediction accuracy with something as real as path dependence, right? How would you marry these two?
One way to make sense of those long tail, we call it long tail signs, is to put those signs in a model. Sometimes that's a statistical model, sometimes it's a mathematical model, sometimes it's just a pattern that is repeating itself in history, and you put those signs into the pattern that you have already from the past and see if it matches. If those signs are matching a pattern, you better be careful, because there is 70% chance that that pattern will repeat itself. Okay, and I'll give you just an example of a pattern, right? There is a very known study that was done by two academics. One has just passed away lately, and they have found that in the last 500 years, which is not a lot, but we don't have enough knowledge from the past in order to do much more than that, than 500 years back. They have found that in the last 500 years, humanity has developed in a cycle of 80 years. 80. Okay? And those 80 years, it always starts with a calamity, with a great disaster. And those 80 years are divided into 4 stages. Okay? And they are repeating itself, 80 years. And it ends also, of course, by an unusual disaster. It might be a war, it might be a collapse economically, etc. The last cycle has started in World War II. Okay? Now, we know that it takes about 60 years until that each cycle actually has a very clear order and very clear authority that is defining that order. I'm not going to elaborate, we don't have time. After 60 years, there's always that order is challenged. After 60 years, most of the time, most of those cycles, we are actually at the 7th cycle in the last 500 years. So it's logical to say that those cycles will continue, even though it's only 70%. It doesn't say that it's 80% or 90%. So after 60 years, there are so many, holes in that order that are emerging after 60 years, and that order is challenged. It takes about 20 years until that order collapses. And when it collapses, there is either a war, a huge war, either a collapse economically, etc., etc. We are exactly at the end of the 80 years after that World War II. And we know that something huge is happening in history. Now, world order, we all feel it, is in trouble. And there are a lot of nations and people that are challenging that world order, and it will bring a collapse, somehow a collapse in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, there are already a lot of people that have done those studies with very, very detailed simulations, what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, and we have already the unusual signs. Think about the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, think about what's happening in Israel, think about what's happening now in the border with China, in India here. A lot of things are happening, and let me give you a hint. Something really big is about to happen with Venezuela and the US. Okay, and what you see now with the Houthis, okay, you are going to see Venezuela challenging the Panama Canal, which will bring havoc to world trade. So you can see those signs, and if you put those signs in a pattern that already happened a few times in history, you can make sense of those signs. And you'll be able, to say that you predicted something with an accuracy of 70%. We don't need more than that, because the whole idea is not to predict. I hope you understand it. Who we are to understand what the future will be. The whole idea is to understand the vectors in order to come to the present and try to change those vectors. That's what makes us so unique as a species. We are able to change tendencies as a smart, intelligent, and conscious species.
That's very insightful, David. Before I open out to audience questions, we have some 6-7 minutes. I just had one last question from my side. Last year around this time, we had a similar discussion, and Paul Sappho, another futurist, on being asked this question of, so what can we do in our daily lives to hone this gene of being able to be prepared for the future, right? Not just predict it, right? And he said, observe teenagers, right? On what kind of changes are going to come. Earlier in this conversation, you mentioned that surround yourself with at least 30% of the people who are very different from whom you are. So just before we open out to questions, 2 such practical tips on what we can do on this topic when we step out of this room in our daily lives, which we can keep honing.
The easiest thing to do, I believe, is to read opposite, as much as possible, opposite views and databases, and it's not an easy thing to do, but in any country, in any culture, there are different views. If you are just to listen to opposite views and read constantly, and nowadays it's much easier because everything is in our figureheads, okay, that's not nothing. But you have to train yourself to see the world from different perspectives. Just by seeing the world from different perspectives, by reading different perspectives to the same issues, you are training your brain to be much more resilient into unusual thing that might happen in the future. And one other tip, okay? We have found in our studies something really unusual. We found that we can train babies to think futures. And the best way to do it is when mothers are speaking to babies in as much as possible more words. Not, we tend to speak with babies like babies. Never do that. Speak with babies like you're speaking to your spouse, which is hard. Okay? The more you speak to very young kids in a very sophisticated language with a lot of nuances, their ability to think about the future is much better than any other kid. That's a very good tip. Now, I can assure you, we males cannot do it. Only females can do it. So, not just to read books, but speak to kids in a very sophisticated manner, in future tense as much as possible, nuances. Just speak. You will be amazed how the brain of a kid can grasp sophistications. And that kind of sophistication is a platform upon which his or her neurons are developing better to understand future trends.
Well, that's very insightful, David. Now I'll just open out to questions to the audience. I see 2 hands going up there. We may have time only for 2 questions. Claude is not that easy to manage when we overstep time. So,
Professor, thank you. This has been a fantastic session. My name is Kumar Bagrodia. You very rightly spoke about consciousness. And as you know, it is a subject of a lot of research globally on what is the source of consciousness, with neuroscientists and anthropologists, spending billions of dollars with 2 very different schools of thought. And in your upcoming book, you mentioned about future memories, so which is really relying on the subconscious, as the brain relies heavily on the subconscious to make decisions and also access the memories to then think about the future, imagination. What do you think then is the interplay between consciousness and subconscious when thinking about the future?
In my book, I'm doing something nice, I believe. I'm scanning literature of millennia that try to understand what consciousness is. And I found a pattern that we went through in our understanding what consciousness is. It doesn't say it's consciousness. It's only our understanding what consciousness is. In different cultures, in different scientific domains, etc. I scanned a lot of literature, which was, for me, an amazing experience. Really, what humanity has done for millennia trying to understand such a topic. There are new sciences that are dealing specifically with your question. One of the scientific domain which is new, which is called transpersonality. Okay, so I'm covering a lot of paradigms. What is consciousness? And I found there is a pattern that has evolved during millennia. Okay, what I'm trying to do is just to forecast the next stage based on that pattern, how we understand consciousness, and I'm trying to see what kind of sciences we're going to develop because of that consciousness. What kind of scientific breakthrough, which is, people think that scientific breakthrough are you cannot predict. You cannot, get into the mind of a scientist that is going to be in academia 20, 30 years from now. No, we don't agree. I don't agree about that. There is a pattern that our mind is evolving and perceiving the world. So what I'm trying to do is to understand the next stage of how we understand consciousness, what kind of sciences we're going to develop, and what kind of tools we're going to develop, in order to change our civilization to adapt to that conscious stage or state. Okay, this is not an easy thing to do. I don't think that's exactly what will happen, but this is the way we as futurists are trying to understand how things are evolving. And I can tell you there were some people that already read the book, and at least they said to me that this is really a new way of thinking about our evolution, which is by itself interesting.
Great.
Vishal,
Vijay, thank you.
30 seconds.
Quickly.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, quick question. Great, I'm Vishal Krishna, Dr. Pasik. I'm a fan of Isaac Asimov's Foundation, and obviously I'm a student of political science. My question to you is, you said 20% of the world should reserve itself to face future consequences. How do they do it? Do they need to do it geographically, where they put great minds together and in one particular place like the Foundation novel? Or do you think it's going to happen with consequences and will evolve together as a race?
Yes, we are emerging as a collective mind. Up to now in history, we had evolved in, first of all, in very small groups, and then very small cities, and then very small and large nations. And now we are evolving as a collective species. So, but it has a lot of, stages, that evolution. And at the end, I believe at the end of this century, we will be much better, we will be acting much better as a collective than we are now, even though we are going to go through a phase in which our globalization, what we have called globalization up to now, is collapsing, okay? And it's collapsing, and it's either will totally collapse and we will have to start from scratch a new collective global world order and civilization, or we will have just to fine-tune what we have already done in the last 80 years. But I really believe that we are evolving as much more a cohesive species, and we all know it. When you travel a lot worldwide, you see that we are much more similar than we are different, and it will be more and more and more similarity, even though similarity doesn't say that you think the same thing. Civilization is similar. You have the same platform, the same let's say institute, if you wish, but different ideas and different nuances, and we will be much attuned to those nuances, and we will take pride of those nuances, which is what really makes it so interesting to be human.
Thank you for this fascinating session, David. Just to summarize, in numbers, surround yourself with 30% of the people who don't think like you. 10 to 20% of your resources invest in things that are potentially wildcards. Read opposite views, and mothers should speak to the children in more sophisticated ways and not really in prattle. That doesn't mean men should give up the challenge. They should also get better at this. Has had 70% prediction accuracy. Thank you once again for sharing.
One more thing, okay? Be careful. Listen to people who call themselves futurists.
So we will remember that.
Certified futurist, not okay. And there are a lot of people that they think they are futurists. Ask, what's your methodology, and what's the reliability of your methodology? If they cannot say their methodology and their reliability, don't listen. These are futurists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that very energizing and fantastic answer. Seriously?